work that we do at the Workers' Action Centre is about dealing with this, just as you are dealing with it in the school system and with the students that you work with. We are dealing with it every day in our communities through supporting workers who are facing racism, discrimination, human rights violations in their workplaces because they don't have a union, because they may not have immigration status, because they may be working through a temp agency or through a contractor, and don't have the kinds of rights and protections that everybody should have in this country. And I think I really do want to take this moment to talk to you about this, because I think that sometimes when we talk about racial discrimination, there's a big picture, a big piece of the picture that we miss out, and that's the connection between immigration and labour rights, and that's what I really want to talk to you about today. For those of you who don't know what we do and what we are, we've handed out materials, but basically we're a workers' centre. We're a centre that supports workers to fight for their rights. They don't have to have a union, they don't have to have immigration status, they don't have to fit any hole or any kind of space to come in our doors. Many of our members are workers who are in precarious types of jobs, are on social assistance, are unemployed, are people who are trying to make a living, work 2 or 3 jobs, or don't have enough to make a living and are struggling every day to survive. And so if we were able to show a video tonight, it was really expensive to show this video, but I want to talk to you about this video that I wanted to show tonight. I wanted to tell you about Vivian, who's a member of ours. Vivian has been living in Canada for 20 years. She's a Canadian citizen, and so for the last 10 years, she worked as a live-in caregiver. She worked 24 hours a day, 5.5 days a week. She took care of 3 elderly seniors, one with disabilities. She did not get paid overtime. She got 3 vacations in 10 years. But Vivian didn't speak out because she was afraid of losing her job. And I'm going to quote her directly here. So she says, "For 10 years, the employer said I was part of their family. And suddenly, they fired me and told me to get out of their house in 20 minutes. We spend our whole life working, afraid of losing our jobs. We have bills to pay, families to take care of. People should be afraid to speak up because they'll lose their job. I want to send a message to employers that you can't do this to workers, and I want to say to the government, why are you ignoring us and not making employers follow the law?" She is owed over $55,000 in unpaid wages, and we filed a case in Superior Court. I want to talk to you about another woman. Her name is Lillian Namukasa. She doesn't have citizenship. She's come here also under the Living Caregiver program. She was put to work to take care of her family the day she came from her home country. Her passport was taken away, and she was threatened with deportation if she complained and she told anyone about it. She was paid $100 per month. Was not given any days off in 2 years of working, and by the time she left her employer's house, they had kept such control over her that she didn't know how to get around by public transportation, and through the support of a local librarian, where she used to take the kids to school, programming at the library, she was assisted to get into a shelter. She's owed over $162,000 in unpaid wages, and that case has been filed in Superior Court. I encourage you to go to our website and watch those women, Vivian and Lillian, who have been so incredibly courageous when we talk about coming forward against such great odds. Well, here's 2 women who, against so many odds that this country has put them in, have spoken out and have actually gone to the media and in talking about the real situation that migrant workers are facing in this country. And I can tell you, this is a very, very hard thing to do. Not only do we have live-in caregivers that are coming into our country who are told that they have to stay and live in their employer's house. Can you imagine if you had to live in your employer's house? And that, yeah, tell me about it. Can you imagine if you were told when you came to this country, because I'm sure some of you are immigrants here, I know for myself coming here 20 years ago, if my parents were told that they had to go live in their employer's house, what that would have meant for our family. Farm workers are another group of migrant workers that come here from the Caribbean, from Mexico, year after year after year after year, pick the food that go onto our tables and are not allowed to get status in this country. So what makes picking fruit and working on the farms not worthy of getting status? What makes taking care of our children when they are young or our seniors not worthy of getting status? It's a question that we should be asking as we live in this country, because that's what's going on in this country right now. We have more workers coming in to Canada under the migrant worker program than we do through immigration channels. What does that say about the Harper government and their politics around who they should be bringing in and what subjugation they want to have workers come into this country? We have workers coming into our country now who are working in fisheries, who are working in meat processing plants, who are working in the tourism industry, in inns, in resorts, in restaurants, in fisheries. All around us, we have many workers now working in every sector, but they're not allowed to get immigration status. It is a shame. It's a shame, and it's something that we need to do about as a collective, as a new goal in our human rights work. We need to be paying attention to this. And I think many of you may have heard about the 10 workers that were killed up north in the car accident, right? The Peruvian workers. Now, what that story started to just get really fixated on was about these 25 or 15-seater vans. And it became a transportation issue, right? But the issue that did not get covered was the fact that these workers were being brought in by a poultry temp agency. And Bryan Poultry Services, that works up north, was basically then contracting out these workers to go work in poultry farms as temp agency workers. That doesn't get talked about. What doesn't get talked about is the enforcement of people's working conditions. Where are they living? How many people are being put into an apartment? We've had workers come into our doors who are working in restaurants in Toronto, Indian restaurants, as one of the places where people are being brought in, where 5 workers are being put in 1-bedroom apartments, where someone's sleeping in the bathtub. That is happening right under our noses. And I think that this is something that we need to be paying attention to. And what's interesting is people are starting to pay attention to. What was interesting was the Quebec Commission for Human Rights and Youth Rights is asking the Quebec government in that particular province to put an end to systemic discrimination against migrant workers. In its report, just released the other month in February, the Commission points out that migrant workers coming into Quebec under temporary work permits are victims of systemic discrimination based on their ethnic, national origin, race, social condition, language, and in the case of living caregivers, gender. According to the Commission, this vulnerability exerts a downward pressure of the working conditions of all employees in all sectors where migrant workers are employed. And guess what? Migrant workers are in many different sectors of our economy. So what we need to do is understand the connection between workers who are working on the farms in our communities, workers who are making our food, workers who are taking care of children and seniors, workers who are building our buildings, workers who are processing meat that we end up eating. These workers are all connected to our communities and to our families, and we have a responsibility to deal with this. Over 6 million workers in this province rely on employment standards for their basic protection. These are workers who don't have unions. This is aside from migrant workers. And guess how many inspectors we have in the province? 30. 30 inspectors for the whole of the province to cover over 370,000 workplaces. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out no one's going to get inspected, right? And so what we did last year is we went out, because you know what, a lot of statistics, a lot of reports out there don't actually talk to the people that need to be talked to. And a lot of workers are struggling to make ends meet. They don't have time to pick up the phone and answer a survey. And many people don't even have a phone. And so what we went out is we went out in the communities that we work with, and we decided to do our own survey. We decided to talk to workers who were racialized, who were immigrants, who were newcomers, who were in precarious jobs, who were in part-time jobs, who didn't have unions, and we wanted to talk to them about their conditions. And guess what we found? 22% of workers were making below minimum wage. That's $10.25 an hour. 64% made $12.50 or less. 33% reported just being owed wages from their employer. And the majority of them were being completely unsuccessful at trying to get that money. 31% reported that their pay was always late and paychecks bounced. Many people, only 18% got sick days. Only 18% of workers this was like a survey of over 500 workers got sick days. And many did not get public holiday pay, overtime, vacation, I mean, you name it. It was not part of their daily experience. And so we see these types of violations every day at the Workers' Action Centre. We operate a phone line, we do a lot of education in the community, and we go out, we speak to people about what's going on at work. And we've seen such a huge rise in basic violations, the kinds of things that we should be able to take for granted, like getting paid at the end of the week, getting a paycheck that doesn't bounce. Do you not think that that's a basic right? I'd say that that's a human right, right? Yes. And so if people are not getting paid, if people are living in poverty, if they can't expect to get a job the next day, if they're working on the phones and wondering if they're going to have work tomorrow, next week, next month, if they're afraid that they're going to get deported if they speak up, well, to me, that raises a huge question about whether or not we have human rights, whether or not we have labour rights in this province. And I would say that I don't see that in my work and in the work of our organisation. And I think that it's really important as educators, as people who are in schools, that you understand what the realities are of the kids and the families that they're living with are facing. That has a huge impact in terms of how they learn and what they're facing when they go home. If their parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, they're not getting home until late at night. They don't have time to supervise homework. They're struggling to pay the bills. And that is what a lot of Ontarians and a lot of people in our city are facing. Poverty is on the rise, and in particular in racialized communities. And we have to talk about this. We have to deal with it, and we have to understand that we need to make the connections with labour rights, with education, with poverty, with human rights and immigration. It's critical. And I think there's a message here for all of us. We need to support the struggle of migrant workers, of women living caregivers. And I don't think we have a choice. We don't have a choice if we're in this struggle for human rights. We don't have a choice at all if we don't ensure that migrant workers and the fight for basic rights for migrant workers and for them to get status in this country is fundamental to human rights. If we don't make those links between what we're fighting for in education, in healthcare, with the workers who are brought into this country to do that work that don't have status, without a voice, and who can be deported for speaking up, then we're just missing a whole bunch of the picture. And I think you have to ask yourself,